All right, so today we are going to go over 6.1. We're going to introduce you to the basics of propositional logic, um, give you the basic translation rules, the basic operators. Here's something important to realize from here on out. Each class from this point out is going to build on the previous classes. That doesn't sound very intimidating, but what it means is this. What it means is that each class that we cover from here on out, to any degree that you do not master the content, it means each subsequent class you will be at a disadvantage. So right now, we're working on the translations and the basic operators. This is the sort of thing you need to gain mastery of, 95, 98+%. If you only kind of get it, like 80%, well, what that means is when we do the advanced problems, like translate, run a truth table for validity, and do some inferences, you will get 20% of them wrong on step one of multiple steps. So much like, for exam one, the syllogisms, learning how to translate properly is the first skill that you need to gain mastery of. This is a skill that you need considerable mastery of. And if you only kind of get it, that's not good enough, not if you want to do well on the tests. So I encourage you, push for mastery. If there are ones you're getting wrong or if you don't understand, ask your questions. Let's iron those things out, do extra practice questions on Logicola. This is not the time to, frankly, half-ass things. This is where we're going to take things seriously. All right, propositional logic. All right, let's learn some basic translations. P, or any other capital letter, is a truth claim. And the truth claim can be anything, and you can assign any letter to any truth claim as long as you use the same letter consistently. So usually you pick a letter that matches a prominent start of a word in the truth claim. So P will probably mean something like, I live in Paris, I'm a philosopher, my name is Pat. And the truth claims can be true or false. But all the letter is a truth claim. Squiggly P, the approximate sign, I think that sign is technically called the tilde. That is a negation. So the squiggly P translates as a not. So it is the claim that I do not live in Paris. My name is not Pat. I am not a philosopher. And as you will see later, you can put negations on almost anything. So one of the big challenges in translating is going to be to identify the proper scope of the negation. What exactly the squiggly, the approximate sign, is negating. All right, that's the easy stuff. The bottom one, this is our first compound sentence. This is the and. An and is sometimes called a conjunction. A conjunction statement is the claim that multiple claims are each true. So the claim P and Q is the claim that both these claims are true, that my name is Paul and I live in Quebec. And if either of those is false, then the and claim is actually false. Because the power of and is that it entails the claim that both halves are true. All right, so far I think I haven't said anything all that shocking or difficult or subtle. So let's get to the things that are a little less intuitive. Or, while and means what you probably think it means, or doesn't quite mean what you think it means in logic. Or is represented by a wedge or a little v. It is sometimes called a disjunction. The or claims that one or both halves of the or statement is true. This is sometimes called an inclusive or. Probably the absolute best way to remember what the or means is, and I'd write this down, at least one. So when I say either P or Q, what I mean is at least one of these two are true. The left side might be true, the right side might be true, or what will confuse you most is it's still true if both sides are true. This is different from the normal natural common language use of or. Usually when we say or, what do we mean? We mean one of these two claims is true, but not the other. But the or logic allows for both sides, both claims to be true. So if I say I have either peanut butter or jelly, for the use of the logic or, if I have both, then the or claim is still true, because all it means is at least one of these two claims is true. All right, second bullet point. The arrow in your text, this is represented by like a sideways horseshoe. I forget the technical name of that symbol. I prefer arrows. But this truth claim is a conditional, if then. And all the if then promises is anytime P is true, then Q must also be true. So here's what's confusing to most people about the if then. What is the value of the arrow statement when the first half of the statement is false? So if then sounds like this. If you get above a 92, then you'll get an A in Philosophy 205. What is the value of the if statement if the left side of the statement is false? The value of the conditional statement when the first half of the statement is false is the statement is still true. So so here's how I like to think about this one. The value of the conditional statement, the default value is true. It is only false in the case where the first half of the conditional is true, but the second half, for some reason, is false. Here's how I like to think of it. Under what condition has someone made you a false promise? So let's say I'm a generous father, and I say, if you get straight A's this semester, I'll buy you a car. Under what situation is that statement false? Let's say, situation one, you don't get straight A's, and you don't get the car. Was my promise true? Actually, presumably on logic, yes. I said, if you get straight A's, I'll get you the car. You didn't get straight A's, so no car. That's perfectly compatible with the promise being true. Now, let's say I'm the super generous parent. You don't get straight A's, I get you the car anyway. Was my promise true? Well, on our way of thinking here, yes, it is. The default value of the conditional is true. It is true except in this third case. The only time the conditional is false is if you do the first half of the statement. You get your straight A's, and then I say, sorry, I didn't really think you'd do it. So no car for you. That is the situation where the statement is false, where the promise is broken. And of course, the promise is true if you get the straight A's, and I follow through and get you the car. So the default value of the arrow statement is true. The only situation in which it is false is if the first half, the condition, is fulfilled, but the second half is not fulfilled. We'll get back to that in the next lecture, but just know the arrow statement is the hardest of these. Now, the triple bar is sometimes represented by a double arrow, and what this translates as is if and only if. And what it means in practice is that the two side truth values are supposed to match. When the first side is true, the second side should be true. And when the first side is false, the second side should be false. So the statement, the triple bar is true so long as the two halves match. Now that's what some people think the arrow should be, but the arrow only makes a claim about what happens when the first half is true. All right, well, that's a good first introduction to these. Now, just to make your lives harder, bad news, our truth statements can have more than two claims involved. And when you get more than two claims involved, you need multiple parentheses. And it turns out there's a big difference between where you put the parentheses and where you negate things in reference to the parentheses. So there are different scopes of negation. Again, this is intuitive to you if you're any good at math. Putting a negation outside the parentheses is different than if it's inside the parentheses. Very different. So determining the scope of the parentheses and the scope of any relevant negations is huge. So here are three statements that look almost exactly the same, except we've moved the scope of the negation for each one. The first one claims, if I'm Napoleon, then I live in Paris and not in Quebec. And the not is on the Q. So the not gets translated specifically on the claim, I live in Quebec. But we can move the negation and have it so that it negates the entire internal parentheses. Then the translation is different. Then the claim is, if I'm Napoleon, then it is not true that I live in both Paris and Quebec, or I don't live in both Paris and Quebec, which isn't particularly shocking. Most people don't live in more than one place. Finally, we can put the negation all the way on the outermost parentheses so that the entire complex three constituent statement is false. So this third one is the claim. It is not the case, the negation goes all the way on the outermost. It is not the case that if I'm Napoleon, then I live in both Paris and Quebec. See, three very different statements depending on where you stick the negation. So tracking the negation properly and putting the parentheses, tracking the parentheses properly is a huge portion of proper translation in logic. So this brings us to the rather natural question. If that is the case, how do we know where to set the parentheses? Well, here are two important principles. These are not the only important principles, but these are two important principles. Anytime you see the words both, either, or if, you open a parenthesis, even if that requires opening multiple parentheses in a row. A second principle is that commas mark letters that need to be grouped together. So here's an example of how to use commas. If A, then B and C is a different translation than if A, then B, and also C. So the comma tells us which two letters get grouped together in the parenthesis and which one is separated. There are never more than two letters within a closed parenthesis together. Anytime you've got more than two letters, you need an additional parenthesis to clarify the logical order of their relationship. All right, how about that? How have you attempted the exercises for today? Yeah, just be honest with me. All right, how'd those go? How'd those go? How'd you feel about those? Mostly good? All right, well, let's do some together. No, we don't need that. I will just, you don't have to write all this down, but these top two bullet points are worth mentioning. Order matters, order of the letters matters with some of the operators, but not all of them. So for and or, if all you have are ands or all you have are ors, the order doesn't really matter. But with the arrow is the odd man out. The conditional is the odd man out. If D then A is a different claim than if A then D. Or to use English that will make this intuitive, the claim, if something is a dog, then it must be an animal, is a different and true claim, whereas the claim, if anything is an animal, it must be a dog, is a different claim and obviously a false claim. So again, order is very important with the arrow function, the in particular. All right. Now, unfortunately, they still have not installed my software on this computer. I'm kind of getting sick of it, but let's talk about this one. Not both A and B. If you haven't done this, I'm going to pause. I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to attempt it. It's important for each of these that you attempt them. And if you've got it wrong, we can at least talk about why it is wrong. All right. Well, we're starting, in my opinion, somewhat easy here. Not let's try that again. Not tells us that we start with a negation. Both tells us to open a parenthesis. And then A and B tells us A and B. And then obviously, anytime we reach the end, we have to close an even number of parentheses to those that are already open. So that is the proper translation. Was anyone inclined to put anything other than that? Do I need to explain why none of the other answers are correct? One thing that's important here, again, the order of the not is important. If I reverse these two words, if the translation was both not A and B, then it would look like this if I reverse those two words. Because both tells us to open the parenthesis, and then it says what goes in the parentheses, not A, and also B. Another important principle is this. The number of negation words in English and the number of squiggly negations in logic should always match. So one reason why you should not have been tempted to do 1, 2, or 4 is there are too many negation signs in the logic. Now, there are things that you might have to translate that way. You know, we can tell you things like not both, not this, and don't that. We can give you lots of negation words, more so than we would normally use in English. But again, the negation words and the negation signs should consistently match. Got it? All right, both A and either B or C. All right, both tells us to open a parenthesis. A and either tells us to open a second parenthesis. And then we get B or C. And then at the end of the sentence, we close an even number of parentheses equal to the open parentheses. So that is the proper way to translate this. Both A and either B or C. Now, if we change the order of the B and the either, if we'd said both A and B or C, then it would be both A and B or C. But we didn't do that. The charts that it's giving are old charts from a previous class. Wow, this stinks. All right. Either both A and B or C. All right, so here we're starting to use combinations of words that we don't usually use in natural English. But it's important that we translate it either way. Either tells us to open one parenthesis. Both tells us to open a second parenthesis. Then we get A and B. We have to close a parenthesis there. Why do we close a parenthesis there?
Because it's an either statement and you're going to the or after B.
Yes, and also because you can never have more than two capital letters within a parenthesis. So as soon as you get two letters in a parenthesis, you have to close a parenthesis. So now that we've gotten the and, we know what's left is the or. We have the or C. All right. If A, then B or C. Again, take a minute, attempt it. All right. So if tells us to open a parenthesis, A, and the nice thing is it's given us a comma, so we know that A is going to be separate from the rest. Since we have an if, first though, we know that an arrow has to go outside the parenthesis because you always need an operator. Then we get B or C. And then we have to close an extra parenthesis. So again, because of the placement of the comma, that's what makes it 3. If the comma were later, if it said if A then B, comma or C, then that would be option 1. But this is option 3 because the comma comes earlier and separates the A from the B or C. Note, you should never write anything that looks like 2. And anytime you see anything that looks like 2 on the test, it is a trick answer. It is the wrong answer. Because you should never have 3 capital letters inside of a single parenthesis. You always, always, always need a second set of parentheses to clarify the order of the relationships of the terms. If not A, then not either B or C. Take a minute and attempt that. In the meanwhile, I'm going to give me a All right. If tells us to open a parenthesis. Not A, we have a not directly on the A. The comma indicates that the A is going to be separate, so we're going to need another parenthesis after the arrow. Then we have a then not either B or C. So we need a negation before we open the parenthesis for the either. Then we have B or C. If not A, then not either B or C. Now again, once we get multiple nots up there, it's important to make sure the number of negation words in the English and the number of negation symbols match. So anything that like 2, you should not put because that has 3 negations, and there are only 2 negation words in the English. Number 1 and 4 have negation before the if, which opens the first parenthesis. So number 1 or 4 would be something like, it is not the case that if A, then not either B or C. So therefore, 3 is correct. If not A, then either not B or C. All right, now this one is just slightly different than the previous one. We still open a parenthesis for the if. We still have negation A for the not A. We still are going to need another parenthesis. But what's changed this time is the not is after the either. So the not goes on the B rather than on the outside the inner parenthesis. And again, anything like 2, you should be able to realize is incorrect because there's 2 negation words in the English, but 3 negations in 2. 1 and 4 you should be able to rule out because the negation for 1 and 4 occurs before the first parentheses word, before the first operator word. Either A or B and C. All right, this one's actually pretty easy. You know you need a parenthesis for the either. You know you need an A or B. And you know the C is going to be separate, so you've got an and C. So then you just have to figure out that you need one more set of parentheses around the whole thing. So that one's not too hard. Now again, anything that looks like 1, you should immediately realize is incorrect because there's too many letters within one set of parentheses. So really, in choosing between 2 and 3 shouldn't be that difficult because they gave you a nice big comma there that tells you that the C has to be separate from the A or B. Either A or B and C. Yeah, this one's fairly easy. So the comma tells us that A is separate and that the B and C are together. So either opens the first parenthesis. We're going to keep the A separate, then we've got the B and C together, and we've got the or outside. That one's not too hard. All right, so let's make it harder. If A, then not both, not B, and not C. Yeah, so it was the option here, number one is correct. A couple ways of knowing that. First, just count the number of negations. There's 3 negations in the English, and there's 3 negations in number one. If we were to just do it mechanically, if opens the first parenthesis, A, then not, both opens the second parenthesis, not B, and not C. We close that parenthesis because we've got 2 together, and then since we're at the end, we have to close a second parenthesis because we have an uneven number of parentheses. All right, let's get into the more natural sounding English translations. If you get an error message, then the disk is bad or it is a Mac disk. And on the test, frankly, most of the problems will look more like this and less like the earlier ones. If you get an error message, E, then the disk is bad or it's a Mac disk. The comma tells you to keep them separate. So the comma tells you that the error message is separate from the bad disk and the Mac disk. Bit of a dated reference. I don't think I've used a computer disk in like 15 years. Have any of you ever used a computer disk? Like not a CD-ROM disk, like a classic 3 1/4, 3 1/2, 5 1/4 inch floppy. Couple of you. Long time. That's not common, right? All right, let's do a hard one. If I bring my digital camera, then if my batteries don't die, then I'll take pictures of my backpack trip and put the pictures on my website. I'll give you all an extra minute for this one. All right, if I bring my digital camera, open parenthesis for the if, B for bring. We're gonna need an arrow because I see that's an if. We know that that's gonna be separate because of the comma. So we know we're gonna need another parenthesis after that. If I bring my digital camera, then if, opens a second parenthesis, if my batteries don't die, we need a negation inside the parenthesis on batteries don't die. I'm going to use a D for that. Then I'll take pictures of my backpack trip. And put pictures on my website. So then I have to figure out where the parenthesis goes here. And the most natural place to put it is there. Then we have to make sure there's an even number of open and closed parentheses. We slap those on the end. Now at this point, I should point out, one of the things that the problems are doing to make this harder for you is it's giving you multiple phrases where you might be tempted to use the same capital letter. So you can't use the same letter for bring my digital camera and my batteries don't die. You might be tempted to use B for bring and B for batteries, or D for digital and D for die. And you can only use it once. You can use whichever one you want. I mean, when you're choosing, you need to, select from the ones I've done. But when you're choosing, you can do whatever you want as long as you do it consistently. But each one can only use one. Same thing at the second half. I'll take pictures, P, and put pictures on my website. Take pictures of the backpack trip and put pictures on my website. You can only use P for one of those. You can't use P for both. This becomes important later when you're getting multiple clauses and longer arguments. Yes, ma'am?
How do you know if you're supposed to group the D and P together versus the P and P?
Yeah, that one was a hard one. One reason I only, one reason I didn't give you, let's see, how are you supposed to know that? I think the way you're supposed to know that is this. If I bring my digital camera, then if my batteries don't die, then I'll take pictures of my backpack trip and put the pictures on the web. I'd say when in doubt, group the last group together like that, because otherwise it's really awkward to just, I'm not saying it's never right, but don't do something like this unless there's like commas or something that makes this clear. I think sort of natural reading of English groups that last two together, but they didn't really give us a hard and fast rule that necessitates that. One nice thing I did for you is I didn't give you an option where everything else was correct, but you grouped the middle two together instead of the last two. If you both don't exercise and eat too much, then you'll gain weight. Wish that were true. All right. If opens the first parenthesis, if you both opens the second parenthesis, don't exercise, not X, and eat too much, and E, then you'll gain weight. You close the parenthesis because you've already got two things together. Then W. Really the hardest thing there is, the two hard things there is the double parenthesis at the beginning, the if both. And again, they gave you exercise and eat, two things that you'd be tempted to use an E for. The statue isn't by either Cellini or Michelangelo. This one's pretty easy. We've got a negation, either opens a parenthesis, then we have C or A. That one's pretty easy. If I don't have either $2 in exact change or a bus pass, I won't ride the bus. All right, if opens a parenthesis, don't gives us a negation. Either indicates another parenthesis, then we need T for $2, or B for a bus pass. Then we have a comma. It doesn't say then, but since we started with an if, the implication is then I won't ride the bus. So the trickiest thing there is realizing that you've got an if opening a parenthesis, a don't indicating a negation, and then an either indicating the next parenthesis. So you've got this pattern. If Michigan and Ohio play each other, then Michigan will win. All right, now let's pause and pay close attention to this one. Most people get this one wrong. And here's why. How many truth claims are in this first clause? Most people mistakenly think there are two truth claims, but there's only one. So the claim isn't if Michigan plays and Ohio also plays. There's not two independent truth claims in there. The claim is if Michigan and Ohio play each other, then Michigan will win. So the proper translation is something like, if P, then N. If they play, then Michigan wins. So be careful, because this sure looks like, it's got an and in there, but even though there's an and in there, there's really only one truth claim in that first clause. Let me skip to one more. Let me skip this one. Here's another one, and it's similar to the one we just did. Everyone is male or female. Is there one truth claim there, or is there two? The correct answer is there's only one truth claim there. The claim is that sex is binary. The claim is not everyone is male or everyone is female. It's not two different claims. It's only one truth claim. And therefore, the proper translation of that is something like E. So despite the fact that there's an or, there's only one truth claim in that statement. All right, got it? All right, so other than those last two, the ones that were really tricky because you had to track the number of truth claims, how did you feel about this? All right, again, this is something I want you to shoot for mastery. We want to be getting like 98% of these right, because this is only going to be like step one of multiple steps of what we're going to be doing the rest of the semester. If you're not operating at that capacity, it's okay, but spend some extra time tonight and tomorrow on Logic Pola or going over these, because you want to get these like 98% right. You don't want to settle for 80%, because that'll build the rest of the foundation of the rest of the course on a shaky foundation. You don't want that. Thank you very much. See you at lunch. How's it going?
Actually, I'm learning how to do logic games using LSAT.
Oh, excellent.